A judge has sentenced a man who pled guilty to nearly 50 counts of child sex abuse to 2 years in prison. Andrew Goodman was charged with molesting 2 teenage brothers over a 4-year period, yet he was able to work out a plea bargain deal after pleading guilty to 48 counts of sex abuse. That's 3 more than Penn State assistant football coach Jerry Sandusky was convicted of last month. While Sandusky faces up to 373 years in prison for similar charges, we just had to know how Goodman could only get 2 years. Defense attorney Jason Lamm is joining us to help us try to understand this. Jason, so glad you're here with us. Tell me, how does this happen?
Christy, you know, the first thing you have to realize is that cases don't get better with age. Sex cases, child molestation, rape cases, those are the cases that result in the highest acquittal rate. And if you look at this particular case with Goodman, there were 2 victims. Both victims came from difficult backgrounds. That's always the case with cases of sexual abuse. Just look at Sandusky. And as things progressed over time, clearly the prosecutor's evidence weakened, witnesses were lost, and it was much more difficult for them to obtain a conviction. And that's why the judge in this case offered a minimum sentence, which Goodman jumped all over.
Well, yeah, okay, so I'm sorry, just to clarify, who offered that minimum sentence, and why would the minimum sentence be so minimum, 2 years?
New York is a little bit different in that when you get into plea negotiations, rather than the prosecutor making the offer to the defendant, a lot of times the judge will get involved, and this is what the judge put out there. And this is a judge who has now been elevated to a new position, and he's sort of on his way out the door. And that's what he determined was fair and appropriate. There's obviously a range that the New York legislature has established for sentences along these lines. Could there have been a higher sentence? Absolutely. Prosecutors were pushing for 7 years, but this is what the judge put out there, and this is what was followed through on.
You know, Jason, I know that there was a moment in court I was reading about where Goodman actually turned to the 17-year-old who had pled with the judge not to do this, and the victim, and Goodman looked at him and said, "I love you." And there was this audible gasp in the courtroom because you're seeing a man who clearly has some serious issues. How is he not a danger to society enough to keep him in prison?
Well, he's clearly mentally ill. I mean, clearly he's got some cognitive issues that are impairing his judgment. Now, he's going to serve his sentence, and chances are he'll be released in as little as 2 months, given the time served that he's already spent on this case. There's also something called civil commitment proceedings that just about every state has. If it's determined that he is a sexual predator, a danger to the community, the state could then seek other proceedings that are civil in nature to have him committed for up to the rest of his life as a danger to the community. But that's not something that's on the table just yet.
Okay, and what do we know about the Brooklyn DA and some new initiative and how that might have been part of this?
Well, the Orthodox Jewish community makes up a large part of Brooklyn. And to be honest with you, Christy, pedophilia does not discriminate based on race, ethnicity, or religion. And the Orthodox Jewish community has been very averse to law enforcement initiatives to investigate and prosecute this. So some years ago, the Brooklyn district attorney started a project called Kol Tzedek, which in Hebrew means voice for justice. Now, presently, they have closed about 48 cases. But what's so shocking about that is 2/3 of those cases have resulted in probation or a dismissal of charges because ultimately the victims or the victims' families wouldn't cooperate with prosecutors in the case.
Oh my gosh. Jason Lamm, thank you so much for walking us through how this could remotely happen, because that's the biggest question on my Facebook page. I have so many people asking on there. So thank you. We appreciate your insight as always.
Always, Christy. Always a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you.